Hello again. Someone made a Rimworld mod that gives you a checklist of all the war crimes you commit. So naturally, my first idea is to see how many I can check off in 100 days. Now, 100 days isn't that long in Rimworld, and that's deliberate. I want this to have a kind of frantic speedrun vibe to it. I've only got 100 days to commit as many different war crimes as I can manage. And yes, that's right. Repeats don't count, that would be far too easy. Apparently the mod includes 44 unique crimes, and it doesn't tell you what they are until you commit them, so you've got to figure it out for yourself for an added element of challenge. I have no idea how many I'll get, but why don't you guess in the comments below. Anyway, enough thinking about it, let's get into it. We'll be using the regular old crash-landed start on Cassandra Classic Blood and Dust difficulty, because war crimes typically involve people, and Cass is most likely to give us a reliable supply of them. Our three folks are Velvet, the elderly manual labourer, Conrad the pyromaniac smartman, and Werner the, well, sort of everything else. Werner knows how to fill a skill gap. We've settled in a fairly standard area of temperate forest with small hills, to provide us with a nice clean defensible area to build in. I don't want the regular Rimworld gameplay to prevent me from committing war crimes as quickly as possible, you know? That's why we're keeping things pretty standard here so far. Oh, and we also brought along a donkey, named Thistle. Don't get attached. Right, let's sort the basics. Werner is planting rice, and Velvet is cranking out stone blocks, with which we'll quickly make a small warehouse, a barracks, and a little research lab for Conrad to get to work in. I'm not really sure what to research, so I'm just going to grab batteries for now. I don't want to spend a lot of time researching geothermal power when we'll only be here for a short while anyway. I named the faction War Criminals, and then the settlement Illegalton, and then we just got to work building a kitchen. The survival meals won't last long. Rather conveniently, just to our southeast, we've got a decently sized patch of gold and jade that will help us make some nice cash once the traders arrive. But that's not what arrives. Lesnikov does. Sadly, none of our colonists are very good at shooting, so he makes it in close, where thankfully Velvet puts him down before he can do any serious damage. And she puts him down alive, which is very handy, because you can't commit war crimes with a corpse. That's actually not true at all. We'll do that later. It's handy because it means we can stuff him into a dark, wet box and set him to be enslaved. And sure enough, the next morning, the war crimes roll in. Turns out the Geneva Conventions Act 1957, 3rd Schedule, Part 1, Section 2, Chapter 2, Article 25, details numerous individual war crimes regarding the conditions in which prisoners are kept. And poor Lesnikov's cell is dark, damp, bedless, and without proper fire protection. That last one surprised me a little, but I suppose it makes sense. Also, we're apparently preventing him from worshipping. And I mean, I guess we kind of are. We also failed to provide him with adequate clothing, because the clothes he arrived in are all ruined. This also counts as degrading treatment, I guess. So there you go. Of the 42 war crimes this mod tracks, we've committed 7 in one fell swoop. And after our first rice harvest, Velvet goes in to try and break his will and enslave him, which is of course a war crime. Very good. I think next then we'll just execute him. Pretty sure that's another one. Yep. But let's take a break from all this to talk about today's sponsor, HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. I think that I probably have the best job in the world, but working from home every day does make it too easy to just order food or fall into cooking the same boring meals every day, so HelloFresh having a dinner menu with over 50 items to choose from helps to keep things interesting in the kitchen. And it's not just dinner, they're giving you 1 free breakfast per box forever, which I've been told is a very long time. Playing at the side of the screen is me cooking halloumi and refried bean tacos, by the way. All of the ingredients for which arrived in their own insulated bag with some ice and a printed recipe. It's very convenient. If you lived in, I don't know, for example, a nuclear bunker, it would be really great to not have to go out and get the ingredients yourself. It's easy to tailor your menu for the week. Personally, I filtered for quick meals because I just don't really enjoy long cook times. I want the food in my mouth within about half an hour where possible. But if you have other preferences, like if you wanted high protein meals for example, you could filter for that too. And you can also make it fit your schedule by choosing a specific delivery date or skipping a week if you're away. So click the link in the description or use my code and get 10 free meals plus free breakfast for life. 1 breakfast item per box while subscription is active if you're in the US. Outside the US, the local discount will apply. Alright, back to Lesnikov. Let's rip off his head. I thought this would be a war crime, but I guess it doesn't get that specific about the dead. It just specifies that they should be disposed of in a venerated fashion, because when Werner butchers him, that's the crime we're technically committing. Non-venerated disposal of dead. That pushes us up to 10 out of 42, roughly 25% of the possible war crimes committed. And unfortunately I think they'll get much harder to figure out from here. It feels like we've just blasted through the really obvious ones. So let's just progress the base a little, setting up a wood-burning generator to electrify the base. But this is interrupted by a bulk goods trader, who'll buy Lesnikov's skin and a load of our gold to supply us with a handy infusion of silver. I haven't really been paying attention to everybody's mood though so far, and Werner has gone a little bit mad. He's stumbling around in a state of abject madness. And come to think of it, I never built the guys a table, so it's only fair that he's gone over the edge. I did also make him butcher a person, but no, it's probably the table thing that sent him to madness. Once he's finally done with that, a small group of tribals are passing through the area. Ordinarily the kind of thing you would just ignore, but today this is an opportunity. So we'll head out into the rain for some attacking civilians or neutral parties. I then proceeded to accidentally butcher one of them. Wasn't intending to do that again, and it's going to make everyone sad. Oops. Anyway, perhaps in response to that attack, they've sent a single raider to give us what for. Which goes predictably poorly for them. By the way, it's safe to assume that at any given time, everyone in the base has food poisoning. Our best cook is level 4, and not much cleaning gets done, so everyone is being sick pretty much all the time. But nonetheless, I'd like to start walling us in, because that means you can use traps, which I'm pretty sure is a war crime. And after Werner builds the first wooden spike trap in this little natural choke point, sure enough, one pops up. It's not the use of traps full stop that's a war crime, but the use of them in an unmarked location. Where do claymores fit under this? If anybody knows what differentiates them in this situation, I would be curious. Anyway, things are going well. The walls are steadily going up, but now Velvet and Conrad both have the gut worms. Lovely. Those will go great with the constant food poisoning. But in brighter news, here's a slaver. I wondered whether simply buying a person was a war crime and purchased this impid named Curat, but no, I think that's just a regular crime actually. I also bought some Wake Up to give her, because I also wondered whether forcing someone to take amphetamines was a war crime. But no, I think that's also just a regular crime. Now we've been steadily working through research, and are about halfway through machining, after which we'll work towards turrets and then tox gas. The former may or may not be a war crime, something about autonomous weapons maybe. The latter though absolutely is. Chemical warfare is a big no-no, of that much I'm sure. I wondered briefly whether there were any crimes around the topic of fertility procedures, but I think that those would just fall under the same umbrella as any other medical procedure performed on a prisoner, which I assume is a war crime. We'll see at some point, I'm sure. My reverie on these subjects is interrupted by manhunter raccoons, a relatively simple threat to deal with. Unlike Conrad deciding to go on an insulting spree, that is very annoying. One of the more irritating mental breaks because of how much it ruins everyone else's mood. So it's no surprise when a little while after he's done ranting, Werner and Curat both have mental breaks. Werner is smashing up his room whilst Curat hides in hers. Whatever, it's no huge deal. Unlike the amount of food in the base, there is none. That is a huge deal. So, sorry, Thistle. Your sacrifice is very much appreciated. Perhaps ironically, we were just finishing up the dining room too. But it's okay, it won't lay empty for too long. We'll get to that in a minute though, because a pair of wasters have just arrived. Everyone lines up to meet them in the entrance to the base, and then I realise that Curat here is a human flamethrower. In other words, she's a weapon that causes superfluous suffering. Very nice. Now, back to food. I saw that there was just blood absolutely everywhere outside, and realised that a megasloth had hit a trap and gone unconscious from blood loss. Sweet, that's a lot of meat. And whilst Werner gets to work butchering it, some cargo pods of chem fuel land nearby, which would have been very helpful if I hadn't already sorted the whole flamethrower thing with Curat. Now a large group of chickens decides to join the colony. I'm pretty sure I can't do any particular war crimes with farm animals, but nonetheless I'll make a pen for them to live in, which requires finally bashing apart all of this nearby wreckage to make the space for them. Moving on, I was exploring the available crafting options that have arisen from all of the research we've been doing, and I realised that I couldn't make half of this stuff even if I wanted to, because our best crafter is Curat with level 4. That's going to be a problem. But it's not a problem we can solve quickly, unlike the lack of bedrooms, which we absolutely can solve, with a set of oddly shaped individual rooms. I've researched my way along to turrets and built one, only to be disappointed that there's no war crime associated with that. I'm not sure why I thought there would be one, to be fair, but maybe it's just because they're not autonomous enough. Maybe the use of combat robots like the Minotaur will be a crime. But before I can embark down that particular avenue of study, some Wookiees arrive and are unfortunately all killed. It's fortunate that we held them off, of course, but I'd have liked one to vivisect. That must be a war crime. And now we can go and destroy the mech thing for its transponder. With it safely stashed in Curat's pocket, I'll forget about it for a moment, being distracted by building bedrooms and researching tox gas, until she decides it's time to rebel and vomits fire all over my generator. After being put in her place, she drops the transponder, and after accepting a pair of yaks to the colony and putting Curat to work on a tox launcher, Conrad can decode it. Apparently activating it will summon a lonely scyther, which I'm pretty sure we can deal with, so let's do that. And sure enough, thanks to some uncharacteristically good shooting from Werner, the problem is dealt with mostly painlessly, leaving behind a ship to deconstruct for parts and a dusty old mechaniter to deconstruct for a mechlink, which Conrad will plug right into his brain. Before I can get into any of that mech stuff, the Wasters have shown up to have a go. With a decently sized force and lots of guns, it's fairly close, but Velvet can hold her own in a knife fight, and that scares everyone off pretty quickly. After the fight, when everyone needs Conrad the most, he's our doctor, remember? He starts wandering around in a daze. Alright, buddy. Real cool. Very good. So in his place, Curat will have to get acquainted with a suture needle real quick. In better news, we captured one of the Wasters, and it turns out that we committed 2 more war crimes in the process. Having held them overnight, we've apparently committed the foul crime of not paying a prisoner of war. I didn't really know that was a thing, but also, much more understandably, we didn't treat their wounds. And then they died. So, whatever. 2 more war crimes. Now to sew everyone back up. A day or so later, some donkeys arrive at the colony, perhaps distant relatives of Thistle, rest in peace. And I'm not sure why I'm being given so much livestock on this run, but I definitely can't support it all, so a cull is likely coming very soon. Curat finishes work on that tox launcher, so eventually we'll test that on someone and see whether or not it's a distinct war crime, but for now we've finished researching solar, so can finally have more reliable power in the base. And also Werner has finally reached plants level 8, so he can plant heal root. We've just been going and harvesting it in the wild every now and then, until now. Let's get to some of the basic mech stuff then. Building chargers, a subcore thingy, and the mech gestator itself in what used to be the barracks. Before he has the chance to use any of it though, Conrad goes on a fire-starting spree. He is a pyromaniac after all. It's fine, I don't think there's any danger of him lighting anything explosive, so we'll just leave him to it and put out the fires behind him. And once he's done, he'll make a subcore and set a Minotaur to gestate. Ah, good. A Wookiee has fallen from the sky. So let's send Velvet out with the tox launcher. I'm surprised that gassing a non-combatant to death isn't a war crime, but alright, whatever. Some random visitors left behind a camel hide shade cone as a gift, and naturally, since he works in his sunless laboratory all day, Conrad puts it on. Whatever makes him happy, I guess. At this point I'm hunting in the research tree for anything that might be a war crime, and it occurs to me that now I have a mechaniter I'm going to have to deal with toxic waste. So I wonder whether dropping them on my neighbours counts as a war crime and start researching towards transport pods. A wanderer joins the colony now, an optimistic child named Savage. Surely the employment of child soldiers is a war crime? Maybe not. At least I didn't get one by momentarily drafting him with the pistol he brought anyway. Not a lot happens for a while here. My nearly grown heal roots die of a blight, I let the Constructoid build a Jade Steel because it had nothing else to do, and then finally after a few days of nothing, some Wookiees show up. After giving them the old gas and gun combo, we'll drag this one, Dullark, into our makeshift prison cell and instruct Savage to rip out his kidney. Which didn't go well, obviously. He's 11 years old and not very skilled. Alright, Conrad, you have a go. It turns out organ harvesting is just classified as violence against a prisoner, so no new war crime, but it was good timing, because now we have a nice fresh kidney for this book goods caravan, from whom we'll buy a load of books. I keep saying in my Rimworld videos lately that I really enjoy collecting books, and that continues to be true. I just can't resist. So books make me happy, but a lack of new war crimes makes me sad. I'm really struggling to find any new ones. There's so many more out there, waiting to be discovered, and some of them are probably really easy to commit, I just can't figure them out. I do wonder whether turning off ideology has barred me from a few. I could believe that forced conversion is a war crime, for example. But anyway, we've finished researching transport pods, so this might help. If Conrad would just stop setting things on fire for a minute and Dullark would stop going berserk, we could find out. But on the bright side, by not feeding Dullark after his berserk rage, I've committed a new war crime. You're not allowed to starve prisoners. Fair enough, that makes sense. Now then, we'll load a transport pod full of toxic waste and send it to the nearest tribal settlement. Sure enough, that's considered weaponry that causes undue and superfluous damage to the environment. And then that got me thinking, what if I just sent Dullark? Come on, Wookie, into the pod with you. You're going to your new friends at Gol Poinsqua. That's 2 war crimes. For one, sending them away counts as enslaving them, because we're essentially selling them, but it's also deportation, exile, or abandonment of a prisoner. Very good. So now we're at 18 of 42 war crimes, getting towards a respectable count. But throwing toxic waste around has consequences. The Toxo Federation, despite their name, didn't like our gift and have sent a worryingly large force to tell us that. Oh dear. I fear this could be painful. We've got 2 Militors and that will help, but very quickly one is put down. And very quickly so is Velvet. Ouch. This dude here with the armor and longsword is the real problem. Kurat's on the floor, crawling away when he finally goes down, letting the boys with guns focus on all of the soft, unarmored archers. After dealing with a few of whom, the rest run. And whilst gunning down the runners, I discovered another war crime. Intentionally injuring a pawn who is hors de combat, which basically means out of action due to injury. Fair enough. No time to celebrate though. Everyone is really quite badly hurt. Savage is missing an eye, Conrad is bleeding out, and Verna's hardly doing great. So I sent Kurat to work on Conrad first, but she collapsed, so Savage had to be drafted in as an emergency doctor whilst Verna patches himself up. Kurat, without a doctor herself, dies on Conrad's bedroom floor. So that was rough. While everyone rests up a bit, I'll have the Constructoid build a jade sarcophagus for Velvet. And then when everybody's back on their feet, they hold a surprisingly successful funeral, boosting everyone's mood for a while. So, now would be a really good time for another raid, right? The Tox folk sure think so, sending a small force who are put down mercifully easily. 2 bad raids in a row will pretty easily end most colonies, but we got away with it here. Just like this wild Wookiee got away without being firebombed. I was wondering whether incendiary shells from a mortar somehow counted as their own war crime, but I couldn't hit her, so we'll never know. My next question is whether attacking a worksite is a war crime, so I send Conrad and his Militors to a nearby hunting site to find out. There was just one dude here, and sure enough, after looting the site and leaving, we get a new one. Pillaging civilian locations. Very good. After Conrad arrives back home, even more wasters show up, all of them wielding tox grenades, which can absolutely be a problem, but it is a problem largely solved by the existence of Militors, who don't have lungs. Since Kurat's room is now empty, we'll capture Necro here to try and find more war crimes inside of him. Savage grows into an adult and gains a passion in mining alongside the beautiful trait. I'm not sure I can agree with that one, but maybe he's just not my type. Anyway, we're 90 days in now, time's nearly up, and I've got 20 crimes discovered. If I could just find one more, then I would be halfway. What's the most awful thing you could do to a person in Rimworld? Oh, there it is! I failed to provide Necro here with a table, forcing him to eat without one. Truly, the most horrific of war crimes. I find it funny that I didn't commit this one already, purely because I've never fed a prisoner, despite having kept quite a few. A depressive old woman named Speedy joins the colony, chased by a small group of impids who are easily dealt with. Then unfortunately, Savage walks into a trap and gets pretty badly hurt. He's tended to no problem, but a little bit later develops an infection. An infection that will, after some time, claim him. Dang it. Well, it's day 95 and the home front isn't exactly looking great. So let's turn outwards and head to that same Toxo Confederation settlement that we dumped toxic waste on earlier. There must be another war crime to wring out of this before time is up. Unfortunately though, the place is quite well populated, so we give it a go, but the inevitable happens. I didn't really expect anything else, but with time running out, I had to at least try and find another war crime or two. I think the gang kind of got what they deserved here. They've been pretty awful neighbours. We managed to find half of the war crimes that this mod tracks, and committed a total of 248. Most of which came from using fire as a weapon, because in some circumstances it seems like every tick of burn damage counts as an individual war crime. Perhaps a run that aims to simply maximize the raw number of crimes would be funny too, but I think the result would be much less interesting than this, since it would be far more repetitive. So there you go. Probably the most Rimworld video I've ever made. Haha, war crimes funny. I don't generally enjoy that element of the Rimworld community, but this mod turning war crimes into a puzzle to be solved was actually quite enjoyable for me. So I hope you enjoyed it too. If you did, remember to like the video and subscribe if you're not already. But whatever you do, please remain indoors. The ghost of Thistle the donkey is out there somewhere, and you wouldn't want to meet it. Until next time, thanks for watching. Goodbye.